America was the first country to put a man on the moon, but for the past decade or more, its space program looks a little bit like a symbol of national decline. This famous NASA space agency hasn't had even a space shuttle for 9 years. And that was supposed to change today with the launch of the beautiful Dragon capsule sitting on the top of a Falcon 9 rocket until bad weather forced the postponement until the weekend. But what is so unusual about this capsule and this rocket is that they were not engineered by NASA or, in fact, any government agency. They were engineered instead by investor and entrepreneur Elon Musk, the Tesla guy.
The way I got interested in space was I was trying to figure out why we had not gone to Mars. And then I thought, well, maybe we need to reignite public excitement in Mars. So I initially started off with the idea of doing this like philanthropic mission to send a small greenhouse to Mars, to get the public excited about sending life to Mars. And if we got the public excited, then they would tell their representatives in Congress and to increase NASA's budget. Essentially, NASA needs to have more affordable rockets. That we need to increase the pace of innovation in space. And so if we can give NASA another horse in the stable that is moving faster and cost less and is more innovative, then that would be a way to accelerate progress in space.
Joining me is Brad Tucker, Research Fellow at the Research School of Astronomy and Astrophysics at the Australian University. Brad, it was great to see you. Let's go for the start. Why doesn't NASA build its own space shuttles anymore?
So that's an important question because when we look at the space shuttle, historically it was around for decades. One of the problems was it was inefficient, especially in terms of the cost. Every time that shuttle went up, it cost $1.2 billion. That's a lot of money. And more importantly, it wasn't really reusable. As we just heard Elon Musk, the shuttle would go up, come back down, but the rocket boosters, the tank, all fell in the ocean. So it's kind of like buying a car at the lot, driving it, and when it runs out of petrol, you just dump it and go buy a new one. Not really cost effective. And the SpaceX vision was reusability because the more you reuse it, the cheaper it gets. So it was trying to engage a different way of thinking to make it more affordable.
See, this is the interesting thing, Brad, because essentially we've gone from having something designed by committee or by government, being a bit rude here because they had brilliant scientists, to getting a maverick guy like Elon Musk to build it instead. I have to say, for a start, the result looks beautiful. That's the most beautiful space shuttle I have seen yet. I'm just wondering, what is the significance of switching to a private entrepreneur or an inventor to do what governments did before?
Look, I think this is a good question because it's actually about vision, to be honest, and that NASA, you can't do everything. It was, in the Apollo era, as you said, the first human on the moon. But we also forget that NASA got paid, it was $150 billion to put that human on the moon. And that's not sustainable. That's the great thing about getting a private company and corporation to make it effective and one that can be successful like Elon Musk. And so when George W. Bush opened up NASA contracts to be bid by these private companies that really said, hey, NASA could save money. We can allow a private sector to help us and then use other NASA scientists to figure out bigger goals like returning to the moon, getting to Mars and working in parallel. So it's kind of like a different space race. And it's one that simple decision to open up to private companies like Elon Musk has revolutionized this new space race, which is quite exciting.
Well, it's another good mark for privatisation, another bad one for big government, I guess, but that's me being political. China is about to send a rocket to Mars, they say. Brad, is this a masculinity contest, the space race stuff, who's the first, or are there really great things to learn up there?
There's a bit of both. There's always a bit of competition. It's a bit friendlier, I think, than probably during the Cold War. And one of the reasons why is, China wants to launch to Mars. NASA is launching to Mars in July. But we're also seeing a change. The UAE has a probe going to Mars in July. China landed on the far side of the moon. India built the cheapest mission ever that landed on the moon last year. So space has been so changed. So there's a bit of competition and a bit of who can do what first. But space is also giving us access, especially things like Moon and Mars, to potentially resources we can't get here on Earth anymore that can dramatically change the way we live and travel in space, but also here on Earth. And so there's a bit of need, not just in the exploration, but potentially the long outcome for the benefits to Earth directly and indirectly. So it's going to be it's going to be an even bigger, I think, next decade when we see these countries and companies coming online and more launches, and the private person getting involved as well when SpaceX and other companies start sending private people into space as early as next year.